Welcome everyone to our Inspiring Authors series, which you can find on our blog and which complements our book review club, which has been a great success, I'm happy to say. Now, if you, like me, are a practitioner wanting, dreaming, struggling to add a book to your business strategy, you are in the perfect place. The guests will be sharing not only their writing and publishing story, but also how having a book upscaled their business. Now, I'm eager for more on this. My name is Julie Kennedy. I am your IAPC&M host. And my guest author today is Tony Daloisio. I hope I'm pronouncing that well, Tony.
You did, beautiful.
Thank you. A licensed psychologist, a leadership coach to hundreds of CEOs, and author of not one, but 2 books on change, including The Journeyman Life, The Not So Perfect Path to a Life Well Lived, which I must say myself, I find an absolutely fantastic title. Now, I always ask for a few fun facts. So one fun fact about Tony is he partnered with Stephen Covey, I'm a big fan, creating principle-centered leadership process around the world for 10 years. And he makes a mean pasta red sauce taught by his grandmother, Mama Cuckoo. I love those bits. Hello, Tony. Welcome. Thank you for being with us here today. Now let's dive straight in. I mean, what drove you to write this book?
Beautiful. Thank you for that intro, Julie. Yeah, I'm happy to be with you guys. Writing a book is a really, really cool thing and a hard thing, but it's something that is very inspiring. So what the reason why I did it was because I wanted to tell the story of the things that I had learned in my life for my own grandchildren, really, was my primary motivation. But also, I wanted to go through the process of looking at what I had learned myself and processing it through myself. And also, I felt like this was a point in time when particularly men needed to deepen their own journey to looking at not only the outside of what was happening in life, but also the inside. So there were several motivations for wanting to do it, both more personal and also more sort of societal, if you will.
Right, because I mean, to be honest, I think it's probably one of the main things, right? It's the motivation. If you have that burning desire to get your message out there, you're then prepared to put up with all the insecurities about, am I good enough? Does anybody need this book? And then without even going into the technical side.
I think that's a good point, Julie. And I actually did wrestle with that, but I wrestled that one to the ground. I'll tell you how I did it. And this might be really helpful to the listeners. I didn't really go into it. Even though I am a psychologist, even though I have done a lot of this work with other people, I didn't come at it as an expert. I came at it as something I was doing myself and learning about. So I came at it as much as a learner, not so much as an expert.
Right.
And when I adopted that particular mindset, it freed me up. I decided I wanted to write this book, whether no one ever read it or not.
Right. Right. And I think that's important, right? Isn't it? So in a way, we're writing it almost for us, as in that we need to get this out, that we want to crystallize it in writing, and whether it's for your son or your grandchild or, whoever. And it's that, that idea that maybe if it even helps one person to find their journey, and somehow I have the feeling that that's actually quite crucial to the equation, that when you want to write for a very specific goal, I think the success and what it does for our business, etc., probably comes as more of collateral, not damage then, but benefit.
That's right. I think that's right. And also, I would say this, that what I wrote about in the book, the process of learning and growing, is really my passion. I mean, it's what I do for a living. And I love it, but it's also what I do, and my wife and I do. That's what we do. So it's my passion. I think about it all the time. I love it. I love talking about meaningful things. I love talking about growth. So that's the other thing is, the intersection of, your passion with something something about, with what could actually be in the marketplace to help people. Is
but kind of like still a big step, if I may, because I mean, we're talking to coaches. This is a coach audience here. So
Sure.
let's say that we are all motivated by a desire, to be there, to help, to make a difference in other people, or help them recognize themselves, all their potential. But however, I mean, I've been accredited since 2009. I have loads of ideas, but I still haven't managed to crystallize it into one idea, or maybe even there are too many ideas, which is what's holding me back. How did you know to go for this one?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think an important question. I had been thinking about this honestly for like 20 years.
Right.
I've been thinking about the concept. I used to call it the journey of a man. And then one day I woke up and I said, journeyman. That's interesting. So it really was something I was thinking about, that path, because I was trying lots of things in my life to better myself. And it was just a concept I had for a long time. I think that when I got to be this age, and I'm still working and having a great time in my, regular consulting and coaching life, but I got to a point in my life where I was slowing down a bit. I'm, maybe working like 50% of the time.
Right.
And then I got to a point where I could say, okay, what are the things that are left that I want to do, like my bucket list?
Yeah.
So I knew this was one of them. And so that sort of got me to that point. And then the pandemic happened. Now I did write it during the pandemic.
Right.
But and it was an interesting time to do it, but I would have written it anyway, I think.
The time was right then. Is it sort of that? I mean, okay, it's a two-edged thing, isn't it? Because the time is right. You feel when it's sort of crystallizing, like you said. I mean, even just the fact to suddenly come up with the title which resonated with you is already giving birth to something more concrete than just lots of great ideas.
That's right.
But at the same time, we can't just wait for the right time to come about.
That's
otherwise,
right. I think that's a good point. I think an important point to consider. And I've been thinking about this because I've actually got another book I'm starting to write right now too. And I want to tell you a little bit about that. But one of the things that I've been playing around with, because I'm actually coaching someone on this process, is this is a man who's 65, trying to figure out what to do with the next 10 years of his life, had a brilliant career. And we got to this point in the coaching that we were doing where it's sort of like you have this idea of something, but you don't know whether you need to gestate it more or you're ready to pop it.
Yes.
And it's like, do I have the courage? Do I have the chutzpah?
Yeah.
Or do I need to incubate it more? And those two things create a tension, Julie, don't they?
Yes.
They create a tension, and you could make a case either way. I'm pretty bold. I'm bold. I've always been bold in my life, and I just chose to go for it.
Right.
Like someone else would be just sitting there thinking, I want to get this perfect and figure the whole thing out. Hallelujah to you, but
the thing is, it never is it? Because we continue to grow as well, don't we? We continue to grow. I'm sure that even your first book, I don't know when that came out, but that I'm sure that when you look at it now, with the years or whatever that have been in between, there are loads of things you could add to it because we're work in progress too. But indeed, it's knowing when it's time to actually say, okay, this is good enough for now, let's say. And if I need,
that's right.
Yeah. Do you find it's easier when you've done one to do two and then maybe then three?
Yeah, I think so. Now, the first one I wrote with my business partner, Kendall Lyman, we've been working together for 20 years and it was a really cool process, but it was very different than doing something on my own.
Yeah.
And I think I learned a bit more doing it on my own. I'll tell you how I did do it if you'd like, but let me just finish this thought. So I did actually learn a process. Now, also, working with Greenleaf, which is a wonderful, publishing company, I had several coaches that worked with me. So I learned from them as well. But I think now I have a better idea of how to do it. And I love doing it. I love the process of doing it. I like living my life writing a book, because it's sort of like, when you're buying a new car and you have a car in mind, all of a sudden you see all cars like that all the time. It's like that. It's like anything that happens in your life, you can look at through the lens of the book you're writing. I just happen to like to live life that way.
I think it must be very purposeful.
It's very purposeful. You're right.
And it really gives you something to get out of bed for in the morning. You know, you're
Totally
creating something. Yeah.
Speaking of which, that is sort of one of the most important parts I found about writing a book. Let me just kind of go right there right now.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I did, so obviously once you have a concept and once you've gone through all that stuff, getting ready to figure out if you want to do something. And obviously you have to, kind of get your concept a little tightened, figure out what the boundaries are. I did a really detailed outline, and then I wrote a proposal that ultimately got accepted by the book company. Right. So all of that's really, really helpful and, kind of formulaic in a way. But once once all that's finished, then you have to actually sit down and write. And that's like an incredible moment of truth.
It sounds very daunting.
Holy Christmas. Now what do I do? I've got all these great ideas, but you actually have to write.
Yes.
So what I did and what I found worked for me was the day before, I would sort of figure out what the topic I was going to write about from the outline the next day.
Okay.
The way I thought about it, Julie, was I kind of broke the whole thing down. I knew it was going to be so many words, 10 chapters. I thought of each chapter as almost like writing a white paper. So like 15 pages, okay, or 20 pages. It's a little less daunting. And then you could say, okay, what's the first thing you're writing about? For example, my first thing was the story of you. And I wrote about the 3 stories that we have in our life: the story of your outer story, your inner story, and the story that you aspire to. Those are the 3 stories. So I knew I was going to write about that the next day. Okay. So I thought a lot about, what do I want to say about that? I had some notes. That morning, when I woke up and I went to my writing at, let's say, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I had 2 hours, I could sit down at the computer and actually just write.
It'd been percolating during the night.
Yeah, it percolated all night. And I found that was my process. And every day I did that. And if you don't do that, then all of a sudden you're spending all your time trying to figure out what you're going to write about.
What you're going to write about. Whereas there you're ready to
go. Just going down, banging it out.
Night before,
so I like that. That was my magic ingredient. And then what I did was I sort of figured out how many words I had to write every day or week. It was more week to get it done. And I figured out it was sort of, whatever the number was, let's say it was 300 words a day or something like that. Then I used that as a guideline.
Right.
I figured it was going to take me 6 months. It actually took me 4.
Oh, okay. But
I got so excited about what I was doing.
You said you'd already decided in the beginning how many words your book was going to have. I mean, how did you even decide that?
Well, really, I think the publishing, I looked.
Okay, they guided you.
Googled it, but they gave guidance. Yeah. I mean, most books are like, this one I think was 240 pages or something, but that's, that's kind of a guideline. So the number of words, I think it was 60,000 words or something like that. So that's kind of, a guideline.
Right. Okay. So yeah, exactly. So that's something that sort of is already pre-established. The thing is nowadays not many people are prepared to read, like War and Peace or whatsoever.
Exactly.
It's got to be concise and move them forward. And so so you had your process. Did you find this by trial and error, or was this the first one that you tried and it worked for you? This concept of already.
I did it sort of like that the first time, but not as disciplined and rigorous.
Okay.
And so I just literally kind of came up with it myself and thought, okay, this is how I'm going to do this.
And did you ever have moments of doubt where, you've created your skeleton and what it is that you want to say, and then you realize that there's so much more, and then you keep going round and round in circles and, what do I keep in, what do I leave out? I mean, that's the sort of thing that I struggle with. It's not that I don't know what to say, is that there's too much that I want to say, which is actually paralyzing me.
Yeah, no, I did. I think so, but that's part of what the sort of editing and coaching process was.
Right.
It went through almost like 3 cycles of that. where,
So for this, you were guided, right? You had
yeah,
somebody
I
who
think,
was
I think that
guiding
was
you.
more the guidance.
I think that's one of the tips as well, isn't it? That
Yeah,
maybe for the first one, either, I mean, already what you were saying before is also an idea, of course, is to co-author the first one, with somebody who already knows the ropes or
okay,
who knows
yeah,
a publisher and all of that, so that you
yeah,
can already start to, to get a feel for what needs to be done.
that's a good point. And some people, I mean, like my wife, for example, she's a brilliant writer and a brilliant thinker, but she doesn't do that on her own very well. She does
Yeah.
it with someone else.
Yeah.
Like I'm not like that. I'm very sort of, I go inward and
Yeah.
find it. So it's just like depends on what kind of works for you.
But I think what's reassuring is to know that there are different ways,
Totally.
that we can look up, what different ways are there, knowing that, of course, we are all different in how our brains work and how our motivation works.
Yeah.
And it's just getting ourselves there. Did you ever have moments of doubt where you thought, oh, can't do this, or it's not happening?
I'm sure. I think I just really chose to continue to think about it in the most positive and proactive way.
Right.
Like
It's a choice,
it would
right?
be easy. Yeah, it's a choice. It would be really easy to have a lot of self-doubt. And I did, I'm sure, but I never let it sort of hang me down. I always got over it and said, okay, what do I really, it was always the question I was always asking was, what do I believe? What do I really think? What do I really believe? It's like
Yeah,
I
because
was,
that's what you were saying, right? Isn't it? You weren't even, of course, it is the idea to help others, and you're a coach and a psychologist and all of that. But however, your main first idea was not to become a bestseller, was not to have so many readers or status on Amazon or whatsoever. You were doing it because this was your mission, your journey, and even if only one person read it, then you felt it was a job well done.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's not cliche. It is really true for me. Now,
Yeah.
did I want other things too? Yes. I wanted all the things you talked about, but I really tried to stay focused on my process and what was in front of me and answering the question, what do I believe? What do I know? What can I find out? What are the questions that are sort of emerging? It was really more of a process of self. It was almost like I was coaching myself.
Yes.
Like, what do you think? And sometimes I would workshop things with my wife or some friends of mine, about, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And, I'd sort of get ideas like that. But it's always an really internal process. It's like, now I was also, I mean, research these days is really Googling things. So I was always doing that too, to try to get other people's ideas. But I was always turning it back. And part of the book was also not only talking about me, I was also talking about what was happening in the literature, what was happening in, in science. So, I
And
wasn't.
that's research based, right? So we don't need to worry about it being right or wrong or interesting anybody or whatsoever. But also, I think one other tip that I'm hearing between the lines of what you're saying is to also have a a fertile environment around us. So you mentioned your wife, who's also been through in her own way the writing process, etc. Because I do think the danger that some of us, more common of mortals down here, that sometimes, if you ask the wrong person, you can be really put off track, like, oh gosh, that's boring, or I wouldn't share that. Goodness, what if your mother reads it? Or, that sort of thing, which takes you away and becomes one of those 8 million reasons why you can, just give up. It is not for nothing that it's called the 3% club, right? Of the amount of people who actually set out to write a book, only 3% make it through. And that's what our series is all about, is giving ourselves the best chances to get through to that.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a real thing. I mean, that is a real thing. And I will admit, I think you have to have a very strong sort of mission and purpose for doing it yourself. And then I think, you have to put some guardrails on too. Like if people are going to be naysayers, and you're going to run into things, like you might run into something, well, somebody already wrote about this, or it's like you just have to kind of stay the course, because you'll get knocked down.
And nobody's going to do it in your way. Exactly. Right.
Exactly.
I mean, it's,
and that's the other thing, is that you have to really believe that that's true. And I believe it is true.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so that's for the writing side,
Mhm.
which I can imagine being a big block for lots of people. Personally, that's not my problem. I can write hundreds of books. I have two then worries or what holds me back. One is the technical side, is how do I actually, have it published or self-published and all that. And the other one is the financial side, because of course, I mean, there will have to be an investment in some way or another. So how did you go about that?
Yeah.
With your
Thanks.
first book, let's say, because I mean, you are well established now.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think, what I did was I basically wrote a proposal, like you can get an outline for a book proposal,
Yeah.
Google that, and, that's pretty standard. And I shopped it with, lots of maybe 20 book companies. I chose like ones that I knew did this kind of work. Like Barrett Kohler, for example, is a really good example of a book company in San Francisco that does this. Now,
Okay.
ultimately, I had known them and they knew me. It wasn't right for them for whatever reason. Greenleaf, I had worked with before on my first book and I loved them. And so I ultimately went with Greenleaf. Now Greenleaf, and I think this is an important point because, there aren't a lot of publishers right now that are going to take a first-time author.
Yep.
Okay. I was a little bit better off because I had some I had some experience. But so you've got this continuum of big time publishing company, sort of a hybrid, which really Greenleaf is. And I'll describe that in a second. And then you've got sort of self-published kinds of things that are on a continuum. Greenleaf is more of a partnership. So, for example, they do a lot. They're like a real publishing company. They accept you, and screen you, and they give a lot. But you also are a partner with them. So it's like you're co-investing.
You co-create in a way.
Co-creating, co-investing. And you own your own material.
Well, that's also good. Right.
So that's kind of cool. That's what I chose to do. And I like that model myself. Now, I think it might be a little more costly than if you just self-publish on Amazon, for example.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's
no, I think in an ideal world, most of us would like to go with something like you said. I mean, to have a publisher. I mean,
right. Just think about that. Yeah, but it is a continuum, and it's all available to you. I just have to find out about that. And I think we researched it quite a bit on my first book, and so I kind of landed on this with my next book, the one I'm doing now. I just have a feeling that I'm going to probably get some opportunities from a bigger publishing house, which I might go with. But I'd be happy to write it with Greenleaf as well. I'd be happy to write on my own.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me.
It doesn't matter. It's where you start, and then you can see from there.
Exactly.
But it is
and also
you could
start it, self-publish it, write it, and then it might be really great, and then you could kind of go up the ladder, and a publisher might want to
exactly. I think it's just getting it out first. Yeah, exactly.
So don't let that hold you back. It's just sort of like an initial decision. Think about it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, and I think you have to make it not a big deal, and maybe also, make it fit where it can fit. If you're not that well known or that wealthy at that point, then maybe don't put all your savings into getting a mega publisher, but just get it out there. And I mean, nowadays with social media, etc., there are so many ways that you can. All you need is for it to go viral, and before you know it, you overtake all the rest. Okay, now what, we are also talking about it being of use, let's say, for our business. What would you say it's done for you, having your two books out there?
Well, so the first book was a business book. It's called Change the Way You Change. And it was about basically transformational change in business, which is really what I do for a living in my consulting. And Kendall, my business partner, and I kept track of the number of client engagements that came. And I mean, it was well over $2 million worth of revenue. So
it really was a strong return on investment business.
Now, one of the things we did, Julie, that was really interesting, and I don't know, I found this interesting. I never knew that this was a thing, but when you go through airports and you see the airport bookstore, and some books are on the front, it's like a billboard. You actually pay for that.
Right.
we actually did that with Change the Way You Change for like a month. It cost us, I don't know, I mean, a lot of money, like $7,000-8,000 or something. And but
But
we
that
got
got you,
got a lot of
out
hits
there.
from
That
that.
got
I
you out
mean,
there.
people
Because
were
yeah, we're looking for credibility as well, aren't we? And I mean, again, what
totally,
we're saying, it's not that there's a shortage of books on the topics, but how to choose the right one. And if you see it, in that thing in the front, then
yeah,
automatically you just assume, right, that
yeah, that's right.
it's in the
That's
top
right.
up there.
That's
Okay,
right.
so
So what happened on the business side, it really was very worthwhile. And it's also, as you know, and I know your coaches are thinking this way, it is a bit of a credibility sort of thing that, I mean, it is. There's no
yeah,
question
it
about
is.
it. It's kind of a ticket to admission. With my second book, with the Journeyman Life, which is really more of a personal audience, it wasn't really designed for my business audience. So it was different. What has happened with that? Now, that one actually did really well on Amazon. It was an Amazon bestseller in many different categories. Um,
Pushed by you, or it just got there by
no,
itself?
it got there. Now,
Wow.
the publishing company has ways of helping you with that, but it wasn't anything manipulative.
Yeah.
Just actually became. And so that was really interesting. What happened as a result of that, and I did do one other thing that I think is really useful, obviously, other than having a website, which is critical.
Yes.
So
They've got to be able to refer back and find you somewhere, right? Oh, I seem to have lost you, Tony.
did work.
Yes.
We did work on just outreach DFO. And I had this gentleman, Sam Offman, who worked with me, who was, kind of like a 35-year-old. And he actually reached out to, like you, for example.
Yes.
That's how I got this. And honestly, over the last, my book has been out 6 months. I probably had 15 podcasts I've been doing.
Wow.
Really cool podcasts. So what I wanted to do was to get the book out.
Yeah. So you basically, Sam, so you used somebody who then does all the like social media and connections, etc., saying you might like to listen to this person. Well, that sounds clever.
And a lot of people, I mean, with our first book, we also hired a publicist. I think we spent $10,000 and he got us into some publications, things like that.
Yeah.
That's something you might want to look at. You can do that in a lot of different ways. It does. I found an interesting way to do it. I thought the work I did with Sam, the digital focus outreach, was much more productive, I felt.
Right. Well, nowadays, that's the way it goes now, I think, as well.
Totally.
Unless it's a research book, in a very tight niche where you're looking at certain publications on it. Okay. Otherwise, it's having something which resonates. I mean, I love the design, and I love the title and subtitle of your book. I think it's the sort of thing which people will stop and look at, because
catchy,
we can all resonate.
The other thing that happened, Julie, just recently. So you get a readout on every week how many books are being sold. Last week I had this incredible jump. It was like hundreds of books were sold. And what I don't even know this, but what I think happened was that because it actually was number one in men's studies.
Okay.
Studies. And I think a couple of professors picked it up and
put it on their curriculum.
Isn't that interesting?
But isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Think about then you're affecting the younger generation. Your book is written, at a different stage of our journey, let's say, but to already have that awareness. So this is, I think, exactly what you set out to do, right? And you want it to snowball.
I'm sort of right at that place right now. And what I'm going to do, I wrote a workbook that I just finished that goes along with it, that I'm going to self-publish on Amazon. That basically it'd be great for your coaches, because essentially it's sort of like, how would you actually work someone through this?
Yes, and it's more the practical, right? You're asking them the question and they have to write down exactly. Which stage are they and what do they think?
Much more of an inquiry approach to doing it. And what I'm doing is I'm going to create a course that men are going to sign up for. It's kind of like a men's group, Julie, but a little more programmatic, if you will.
And were those intentions when you started off, or have those just grown with the book?
That's kind of what I thought I would do.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds very holistic to me. You know, you've got the book, and then you've got the how-to for yourself.
Yeah.
And then, you know, for those who want some more individual guidance. Look, Tony, thank you very much. We've sadly reached the end. Is there a final tip that you feel that you would like to share with this audience of wannabe authors?
I think that well, thank you. First of all, this is wonderful to talk to you, Julie. You're fantastic. And I hope it helps the audience. I think that, you know, the main thing is what we talked about at the beginning, that I think, you know, really go inside yourself and say, what do I really, you know, what do I really want to talk about and explore in myself, and have that sort of flourish from the inside out. That's what I would say.
And you really use that to fuel onwards. Tony,
Exactly.
thank you very much. I very much hope to welcome you soon on a masterclass on the Journeyman Life. And also very much look forward to your next book. So do come back and visit us. For the rest of you out there, call to action. I hope you have been taking notes on these wonderful words of wisdom. Tony, thank you very much for having taken the time to encourage and inspire those of us who are not that far on our journey yet. Dawn Campbell, through our site, obviously is also very much of support in helping authors get their books out there. So don't hesitate to contact her. And good luck to you all. Hoping to see your works out there soon, like that I can interview you too. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.